I make the discovery that my brother is my guardian, acting for me with the friendliest designs, and the estate I so admired and envied is my own. It is the eternal nature of the soul to appropriate and make all things its own. Jesus and Shakespeare are fragments of the soul, and by love I conquer and incorporate them in my own conscious domain. His virtue is not that mine. His wit, if it cannot be mine, it is not wit. In other words, we're all somehow interrelated. And because we are interrelated, then we have the ability to live together on this planet. Well, he finishes in paragraphs 48, 49, and 50 with the natural history of calamity. All of nature, he says, is engaged in evolution that we would call transcend and include, going beyond. He says it this way in paragraph 48. He says, there can be no, then there can be enlargement. Then the man of today scarcely recognizes the man of yesterday. The idea is that we're always progressing. We should always be progressing. And that we should be able to look at the individuals of the past and to recognize important things about those individuals of the past, but to not be tied to the past. Finally, he finishes in paragraph 49 and 50. There's so much good stuff here. I'll just go ahead and read for a few moments. We cannot part with our friends. We cannot let our angels go. This almost seems to argue there is no death, right? We do not see that they only go out that archangels may come in. We are idolaters of the old. We do not believe in the riches of the soul in its proper eternity and omnipresence. We do not believe there is any force in today to rival or recreate that beautiful yesterday. We linger in the ruins of the old tent where once we had bread and shelter and organs, nor believe that the spirit can feed, cover, and nerve us again. We cannot again find aught so sweet, so dear, so sweet, so graceful. But we sit and weep in vain. The voice of the Almighty saith, up and onward forevermore. Fair forward is the line, of course, from Four Quartets, T.S. Eliot, and, of course, Dante's Up on Your Feet. We'll come back to those lines, right? Neither will we rely on the new, so we walk ever with reverted eyes, like those monsters who look backwards. We're thinking, of course, of Dante and those who have their head turned around and they're crying so that the tears run down into the butt crack. It's a powerful word picture. Okay, how's he going to finish this? And yet, the compensations of calamity are made apparent to the understanding also. After long intervals of time, and that's a key, after long intervals of time, it may take time for us to develop to be able to have this perspective. A fever, a mutilation, a cruel disappointment, a loss of wealth, a loss of friends, seems at the moment unpaid loss and unpayable. But the sure years reveal the deep remedial force that underlies all facts. The death of a dear friend, we think, of course, of the losses of Emerson. The death of a dear friend, wife, brother, lover, which seemed nothing but privation, somewhat later assumes the aspect of a guide or genius, for it commonly operates revolutions in our way of life, terminates an epoch of infancy or of youth which was waiting to be closed, breaks up a wanted occupation or a household or style of living, and allows the formations of new ones more friendly to the growth of character. In other words, if you've ever heard someone say that, bad things happening builds character, this is kind of the argument that Emerson is making. Well, let's talk now quickly at level 2 and 3. 2A, themes and messages. Of course, we said it already. We've got to learn to ask, why is this happening for me? We cannot be a victim in our life that simply says everything bad is happening to me. Stupid school, always doing nasty things to me with the homework and all the other wretchedness involved. No. We have to learn to turn that around and to ask, why is this happening for me? What can I learn even in the worst of possible circumstances? We have to learn to be content, another major message, but to understand this is not the same thing as indifference. We have to be willing to stand up, of course, and fight when things are bad, right? When there's something terrible happening. If you see bullying going on in your school, you have to stop it, or at least try to stop it, or at least challenge it in some way, right? That is to say, finally, we have to learn to see the big picture. This is not a philosophy that just simply says, don't worry, be happy. This is a philosophy that says, there is sadness in the world, learn from it, and of course, seek to eradicate it when one can. At 2B, the rhetoric, Note the powerful word pictures. The mermaid example comes to mind. There are a lot of those. What was your favorite word picture in your reading of this essay? Notice his allusions to all kinds of texts. Hindu texts, Christian texts. He mentions in the same line Shakespeare and Jesus. Emerson is the great integralist thinker. He's always synthesizing all these different kind of thinkers, obviously very radical for his day. Not so much radical maybe today. We see this kind of philosophy and this understanding, and we can borrow from all the different traditions as we learn. Of course, note the power of this essay. It's a very personal essay. He asks it at the very end. Is it possible that even in the most sad of events, the loss and death of a close family friend, of a lover, can you still learn from that experience? Notice he says it may come after time, when one begins to see the patterns unfolding. Level 3A in the relationship to other texts. Well, of course, we mentioned a number already. We mentioned that Plato's Republic comes to mind immediately, and the idea of, in the end, the answer to the Thrasymachon question of might makes right. We mentioned the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, and of course the passage that we quote from Gita 2. Dante's Inferno, though, comes to mind, doesn't it? Of course, that's an important passage for us in 303. We memorize it, don't we? Let's remind ourselves from Canto 24. Dante the pilgrim is wiped out. He's had enough. He sits down and he says to Virgil, his guide, at lines 46 and following, right before, at lines 43, 44, 45, I've had enough. I'm tired. I'm done. That's it. I'm finished. To which, you'll remember Virgil, right? The lines. Up on your feet, he says. This is no time to tire. The man who lies asleep will never wake in fame, and his desire and all his life drift past him like a dream, and the traces of his memory fade from time like smoke in air or ripples on a stream. Now, he says, therefore, rise, control your breath, call upon the strength of soul that wins all battles unless it sink and the gross bodies fall. There is a longer ladder yet to climb. This much is not enough. If you understand me, show me that you mean to profit from your time, through line 57. Of course, these lines, sacred to us in room 303, are always that calling card to say, you got more work to do. There's never going to be a time when you're not learning, when you're not challenging yourself. Of course, note as well, to finish here at 3A, that Shakespeare is an individual that tries, as a writer, to kind of balance out the universe. Notice that in most of his tragedies, you have some kind of equilibration, a spiritual equilibration that happens at the end. Maybe with the exception, we would say, of Othello's Iago, who never seems to apologize for the terrible stuff that he's done. There's always this question, the Iago question of this essay compensation. Well, yeah, but what about the Iagos of the world? They never seem to ever blink an eye about the evil and terrible things that they do. What about those kind of psychopaths who just do nasty? Emerson would say about those individuals that they are guiding examples of how not to be. In the end, Iago can never actually be happy. All he can do is destroy. Well, at 3B, in the relationship to self, obviously, let's ask the question now. Do you buy this kind of an argument? Does it work for you? In your life, for example, can you think of times where you've learned from a really powerful tragedy in your life? And at the time, of course, it was painful, but after you say, I actually learned something. Now, don't mistake, this is not to say that we wake up in the morning and go, yay, yippee, I hope bad things happen to me today. No. We obviously would seek primarily pleasure and joy and happiness. But when bad things do happen, can we learn from them? And can you think of a time when you did that? How about this one, the negative side? Can you think about a time you cheated yourself? I had a student many years ago who told me a story that I bring to mind and I'll share with you now. He was a great golfer, but he was having a terrible outing at his home event. Okay? All the town's out to watch him golf. He's having a terrible go of it. He is in last place and he's had enough. He's coming up to the last holes, and he's done. He literally walks off the golf course. His father meets him. What are you doing? I'm done. I've had it. Done. No. What are you doing? I'm leaving. I'm going home. I am done. I have had enough. His father says back to him, you can't do that. It wouldn't be fair. Fair to who? Fair to the golfer who is the second to the last. Because think about this. If you walk off this golf course and you quit, somebody's going to have to go home and say to his mom or to his dad, I finished dead last. But if you stay and finish, you will be last. But that will allow for another athlete to be able to say, hey, you know what? At least I didn't finish last. You owe it to that student athlete to get out there and finish last. That is your responsibility. What a great dad, right? Teaching in the moment of great pain. I asked my student, did you go back? And he goes, yeah, of course I went back, because it made total sense. That's absolutely right. Some days you win, some days you lose. What a powerful example, right? Finally, of course, this question. Do you think of life as fair? Do you agree with Plato that in the end there is this virtue of justice in the world? And in the end, everything comes out in the wash? And of course, the question is, where does hope then come from for you? How do you think about the answer to the question of, where do I put my hope? Where does my optimism come from as a student? And as I go through life and terrible things happen, how can I continue to be optimistic? Well, there you go, Emerson's compensation. We'll turn next to Emerson's challenging essay on friendship. That's a fun one as well. I hope that you'll come back. Thanks for being with me for this lecture.